From the Oklahoma newsroom, you're watching Orange Alert, our weekly extended look at Oklahoma State football. I'm Jenny Carlson here, actually in the newsroom with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OSU beat writer Scott Wright. A little bit of a different week with OU Texas and all sorts of different duties. So here we are, a little different this week, but still a lot to talk about as it relates to the Cowboys, guys. A road win for Oklahoma State after a rough week last week at Kansas. Now they head home. And Scott, a lot of questions after that road win because we sort of saw a return to Cowboys of yesteryear. Let's start with Justice Hill because a re-emphasis on him and the running game. We saw him carry a load like he has not this year, as he did last year, though, a couple times. Is that going to continue?
I certainly expect that it's going to be increased. It's going to be at a different level. Now, if you had told me that that once through this many games he would have one game where he had more than 15 carries, I definitely wouldn't have put Kansas at the top of the list. But that's how it went. He needed those carries to get the offense opening up. Got almost got to 20 by halftime and finished with 31 carries at Kansas. One of the better yardage days of his career. A really impressive performance. But Oklahoma State obviously doesn't want to do that to him every week. They want to keep him limited, keep him fresh, get the other guys involved. J.D. King and Chuba Hubbard each had 5 carries apiece up at Kansas. They'll get those guys more involved, I think, and then from there you see how much you can actually save Justice Hill, but you at the same time still need to go win football games, and he's your best option when you've got the ball. Well,
and Barry, when you look at the carries that Justice Hill has had this year, I mean, 31, yes, is obviously on the high side, but as you average it out, this guy is not being overused. They did well early, and then in some games where you thought he might have a higher volume, he has not. So really, when you look at the average, pretty decent, and maybe that offensive line is starting to come around to a point where they feel like they can run more.
Well, I think they feel like they need to try to open up some of that passing game. And plus, he's Justice Hill. He's your best player on the football team probably. So get the ball in his hands. And we saw what he can do. I mean, it's not like there were gaping holes all day. I mean, Kansas did a pretty good job of corralling Justice Hill, but he made a miss or he broke tackles and had a monster day. So when you got a guy like that, you need to get him the ball. Now, 30 carries, 31 carries, that's too many. Can't do that week after week after week. You know, Mike Gundy earlier in the season said 15, average 15. That's probably not enough, but somewhere in the middle of that, 20, 22 carries is probably ideal for Justice Hill.
Well, and Scott, you know, they're still operating at a little bit of a deficit in that running back group because injury, like a lot of positions for this team, that's affecting the running back situation.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We haven't seen L.D. Brown in pads now for 3 weeks. We'll wait and see what happens there going forward. But he's a guy that is a change of pace kind of guy because he is the smallest one of the group, the more shifty guy of the group. So he can do some things that those other 3 guys are not able to do. So that does limit what they can do there. Some of the different 2-back sets that they were running out there that require them now to have a guy like Justice Hill on the field a little bit more. So you know, battling injuries, trying to figure things out on the offensive line. You know, it was a little bit surprising to see them play so well up there, based on the fact that their left tackle Arlington Hambright goes down with an injury on the first series of the game. Tevin Jenkins has to move over to left tackle, where he's hardly practiced at all and played really well on that side. Then Shane Richards comes in at right tackle, and you know, he had some struggles trying to get into the lineup at guard, but he played pretty solid at right tackle. So an interesting situation. We'll see what happens. I asked Tevin Jenkins if he knew what side of the ball he's going to be playing on this week. He says he doesn't know yet. So we'll see what the offensive line looks like on Saturday.
You know, Scott, as we talk about the run game and we talk about the offensive line, you know, what's going to happen moving forward, I think maybe the biggest question as it relates to the offense is, can they continue to throw the deep ball? We saw it reemerge at Kansas. By our calculations, balls that traveled in the air 30 yards or more. Cowboys had only completed 3 of those in the first 4 games of the year. Yeah. They completed more than that against Kansas. You know, we talk about Justice Hill being reemphasized, but what about the deep ball? Is that a situation where that's something that maybe they're starting to get more comfort with doing more and completing more?
It certainly looked like that on Saturday. They talk about landmarks, and it's not necessarily about the quarterback throwing and hitting the guy perfectly in stride. It's about the ball and the player being where they need to be, and the quarterback knowing where to go with the ball in relation to where they're out in the field, what the play call is, what the route is, those sorts of things. So Taylor Cornelius certainly looked more comfortable throwing the deep ball at Kansas. Now this week it might be a little bit tough. Iowa State likes to back up those safeties like Oklahoma State saw a lot last year when Rudolph and Washington were running deep on people. So it's going to be tough to throw deep a lot this week, but it could open up some of the more intermediate stuff. And Taylor Cornelius has looked a little bit more comfortable in those routes as well. So now he does have some big misses on some wide open guys on those as well. But he seems to be a little bit more comfortable when he's able to just stand back there and let it fly. So we'll see what they're able to do against Iowa State. But going forward, the deep ball is going to be an emphasis of this offense, and they've got to keep throwing it down there.
Barry, we heard in the preseason, and really even as the season got underway, we heard from Mike Gundy, other coaches, that Taylor Cornelius could throw it deep. Like, that was one of those things we kept hearing. And it wasn't really until this 5th week of the season that we saw it, that it actually started to come to fruition. But as Scott mentions, Iowa State defense is really strong under Matt Campbell, and they know what to do and they know how to negate things. Is that an area where you feel like we're starting to see what Taylor Cornelius can do? Or, is Iowa State maybe going to try to put the kibosh on that like a lot of other teams will?
Well, I mean, I think Iowa State will try to put the kibosh on that and everything else. Yeah. This is a good Big 12 defense. Now, this is, the Cyclones there were 3 good defenses in the Big 12 last year: Iowa State, TCU, Texas. It looks like the Cyclones are pretty good again. So this is not a game where you can go up there or go to Stillwater thinking, hey, 45-35 type game. It's going to be hard to win a game like that. So the Cyclones will shut down a lot of things. Now, you go back to Justice Hill, you will have to take your spots deep. The biggest problem that this OSU offense has is it's being compared to last year's offense. This isn't Mason Rudolph, and Taylor Cornelius never said he was Mason Rudolph. Nobody in Stillwater ever said he was Mason Rudolph. There's just a natural instinct by fans and media to think, well, they were always good, so they always will be. No, this OSU offense has had to take a step back because they've got a new quarterback. So I think he's been okay. I think he's played well at times. I thought he was pretty good at Kansas. But he's not Mason Rudolph, and he's not going to be. And the home run shots that we've been talking about are not going to come in rapid fire. They're going to have to come with selection and placement and picking your time to try those.
I thought maybe, and we talked about this, so it's not underplayed, but when you talk about the deep ball, you talk about the wide receiver group, losing Jalen McCleskey to transfer. Dylan Stoner's left home, so they're playing a lot of young guys, Barry, and for those guys to be central to a reemergence of the deep ball sort of shows you another layer of what that receiver group might be able to do this year.
Yeah, they got 2 guys that are really good out there. Now, I don't guess either one of them is James Washington, but when you talk about Tylan Wallace and Tyron Johnson, both those guys have shown they can get behind guys, and when they don't get behind guys, particularly Wallace, can make plays with a guy on him. So that's why you keep throwing deep. Why you keep throwing to those guys is because they can make plays even if it's not a wide open situation. So it's still a strength. The passing game is still a strength of Oklahoma State. Those receivers, even though it's been thinned out, those 2 guys particularly are still playmakers, and you got to try to get them the ball.
All right, well, let's talk about the other side of the ball, Scott, and what Iowa State might try to do throwing the ball, because Zeb Noland, quarterbacking the Cyclones, not the starter at the beginning of the year. Kyle Kemp was the guy, got hurt, but OSU saw Zeb Noland a year ago, and he was actually pretty good against the Cowboys up there in Ames. So what can we expect this year? New defense, different scheme. How are they going to try to impact the Cyclones' passing game this year?
Well, it's going to start the same way that it's been successful against a lot of teams outside of Texas Tech. They're going to try to get to him. They're going to try to pressure him, make things difficult for him, make him get out of the pocket, make him throw the ball quick, make him make split decisions. It's going to start with Jordan Brailford. Obviously they lost Darian Daniels at defensive tackle. He's done for the season. season, so they're a little bit thin at defensive tackle, but they like the guys that they've got there. But Jordan Brailford, possibly Calvin Bundage if he is back. If not, Devin Harper is a guy they feel comfortable in that spot. Jarrell Owens is rushing the passer really well. So Oklahoma State leading the nation in sacks. They're going to try to add to that total again with Zeb Nolan and keep him off balance. That's the biggest key. It's the biggest difference from OSU's defense last year to this year, and it's going to be the thing that they rely on, especially with how young and right now banged up they are in the secondary. We're seeing a couple of true freshmen on the field a lot. Some other guys, we don't know what the status of AJ Green, the cornerback, is. Kima Sivaran came in and played a lot in the fourth quarter against Kansas. He's obviously a veteran guy as a graduate transfer, but he's only been in this defense for 2 months now. So guys that aren't as experienced as other guys on the field in that secondary. So they really need that defensive front to step up and get pressure on Zeb Nolan.
Scott, you and I saw Iowa State a year ago when they played Oklahoma State, but Barry, you saw Iowa State earlier this year when they went against Oklahoma. Some different personnel. Obviously, at that point, it was Zeb Nolan at quarterback. David Montgomery, the running back, is a little bit banged up now. Might not have necessarily been at that point, but what's the biggest challenge from what you saw as it relates to the Iowa State offense and what they're going to throw out there this year?
Well, if Montgomery can play, and I think he probably will, but he's a very good tailback. He's shifty, he's quick, but he also can break tackles, get to the outside. You've got to corral him. And the other thing is they can throw the ball, particularly intermediate to deep. Hakeem Butler is a very good receiver. He's a playmaker, and he can give you, he's a big, tall kid, so he can give all kinds of defenses problems. So now, Iowa State doesn't always give people problems. When I've seen Zeb Nolan, I watched the OSU game on television last year, saw him play against OU this year. He's fantastic. The other games he's played, he looks like a backup quarterback. So I don't know what to expect out of that. When I think of Zeb Nolan, I think, uh-oh, here he comes. But, he hasn't been consistent with that kind of production. Oklahoma State, Scotty talked about the pass rush. If they can get that pass rush going, that's going to disrupt Zeb Nolan, and that will really make it tough to get the ball to Hakeem Butler. But if you give him time to throw, Hakeem Butler can really hurt you.
Before we talk about who's in the crosshairs and our picks, guys, Scotty, an interesting, maybe trend is too strong a word, but Oklahoma State has been really good on the road. But they haven't been that good at home when it comes to Big 12 opponents. There's this weird dichotomy going on that they have not been good at home against Big 12 teams. How do you square that with what we're seeing right now? It's
really strange. You look 2-4 in their last 6 home Big 12 games, all 4 losses in games that they were favored in, including Bedlam last year, which obviously was a crazy shootout and a great game. But some other games like Kansas State last year, things like that were really frustrating losses for this team. The 2 wins were against Baylor and Kansas last year, teams that went 1-11 over the course of the year. Oklahoma State hasn't beaten a Big 12 team in Boone Pickens Stadium that finished with a winning record since West Virginia in October of 2016. So this is an important fact for Oklahoma State to get past. This is you've got to be good at home in the Big 12 to have some sustained success, and it's certainly a trend that Mike Gundy wants to change. He doesn't necessarily know how to answer the question. He said maybe they feel a little too comfortable at home and just relax rather than sort of bonding and banding together when they're on the road as the 75 or 85 guys, however many people are on the trip, and it's them against the world because they've been really good on the road and played really well. So a strange sort of dichotomy between the two that they've got to get this worked out, especially this week and going beyond. With game, they're going to have a lot of winnable games at home the rest of the way.
And they had a really good performance against Boise State. It's a pretty good team, or so we think, and really a thorough win there. So really kind of strange. We'll see if that trend doesn't change this week against Iowa State. But Scott, let's start with you. Who do you think is in the crosshairs to try to get that trend changed if the Cowboys want to win on Saturday?
I'm going to go a little bit off the chart here. I'm going with Colby Peel.
Okay.
He is a true freshman safety, a guy who came in the summer, didn't get the early start like some other guys did, but with Malcolm Rodriguez being hurt, he's had to change positions now since his time on campus. He's going to be asked to do a lot in that strong safety type of role, and he's going to have to make plays. He's going to have to be in the right position. It's a tough situation for a true freshman to be in, but they really like this guy. They had other guys backing up, more veteran guys backing up Malcolm Rodriguez before he got hurt, but they liked Colby Peels, what he brings to the field, so that's why they moved him into that spot. And are putting him sort of in a starting position. Now, if Malcolm Rodriguez comes back and is fully healthy, maybe that changes everything, and we'll see. But you've got to imagine that Colby Peel is going to be involved. He's going to have to be good in coverage because there are going to be opportunities for Iowa State to throw the ball, and he's going to have to be solid.
Yeah, that youth movement in the secondary with Jarek Bernard back there as well. Barry, who do you put in the crosshairs as being really important to Oklahoma State's hopes on Saturday?
I'm going to stay the same area. I'll go with Rodarius Williams. The corners have to play well against Iowa State. Iowa State loves to throw to its split ends. I mentioned Hakeem Butler, A.J. Green, Rodarius Williams. Whoever ends up playing corner is going to be under the gun. Ro Williams is going to have to play well in this game. All
right, guys, let's go to picks. Who do we think wins? Barry, we'll start with you.
You know what? I need a Big 12 upset special. I'm going to take the Cyclones. We talked about the lack of success at home for whatever reason. Cowboys are pretty good on the road. Back in the old days, we talked about how OSU's, can win in Stillwater. They just can't win on the road. They go to Missouri in 2008 and reverse that, and since then they've been a really good road program, a full decade of that. But now they can't seem to get stuff done at home. Iowa State's a solid program, playing a little desperate. 1-3 against a tough schedule. I'll take the Cyclones in the upset.
Who you got, Scotty?
Well, I'm going with Oklahoma State. I think that they're going to be able to contain the Iowa State offense enough, cause some problems, set up some good field position for the offense. I don't expect the offense to go crazy, but I think a 35-24 type of game is something that Oklahoma State can win. I think the offense will be able to do enough. The defense, I think, is going to be the star of the show, but I think that they'll set the offense up for enough success that they can win this game.
Yeah, I got Oklahoma State winning a close one. Most of these games, whether on the road or at home against Iowa State in recent years, have been really tight games, even with really good teams at Oklahoma State. So I think it's going to be another tight game. But David Montgomery's questionable health status, to me, is a big game changer. He's such a dynamic player for them out of the backfield, the running back. So I like what I saw to Justice Hill a week ago. I think, obviously, the Cowboys are banged up as well at some pretty key positions. But I think it's going to be a close one. I like Oklahoma State on Saturday afternoon up in Stillwater. We'll see how it goes. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.